It is so wonderful to be here with you this afternoon. So I give a couple disclaimers. Everyone noted that there were people that chose to sit in the back of the room. I said, no worries. I'm an elementary teacher by training, so I know how to work a room. And I know how to also use body proximity to help you get back engaged if I need to. So it's no big deal. So your location in the room doesn't worry me, but I am excited to be here. I've had the privilege over my almost 30-year career of serving in a variety of positions and roles, both in nonprofit and the public sector, in organizations that ranged from 3 employees all the way to 3,000 employees. And so I always bring up the fact that I began my career as an elementary school teacher because it was those 21, 11, 12-year-olds who actually taught me everything I needed to know about being a leader. Has anyone ever had a preteen live in their home or currently have one of those people in your home? And so imagine having to wrangle 21 of them for 6.5 hours a day over the course of 180 days. So I feel like a lot of what I became as a leader was thanks to them. And so I'm excited to share how my leadership journey continued to evolve once I had the privilege of getting engaged with Mindful Momentum and Robin Todd, and how I saw that add to the expanse of my leadership tools. So today, we're just going to spend some time sharing together about what it means and what it could look like for you as a leader to be an engaged leader. And so we've got a couple videos to watch. I'm going to give you some mindfulness tools. I'm going to ask you to actually turn and have a conversation with the people next to you, which it was great because you all were talking to each other before we started, which means you generally like the people around you. And so I will also give you cues on how I will get your attention back, because I can tell this can probably also be a pretty rowdy group if without some boundaries. So does that sound like a plan for our time together? All right, so this quote from Brené Brown really, I think, captures the importance of leadership, because a lot of times you enter into spaces and people say, well, I'm not a leader. And they are still thinking very narrowly that it's title or position that makes you a leader. When all actuality, I think this captured it. So she says that anyone who's willing to take the responsibility for finding potential in people and processes, that makes you a leader. So the people that live in your home, you lead them. Right? The people in your community, you're leading them. The people on your team, whether you happen to be the appointed leader of the team or you're the person just as a member of the team, we all have this ownership. And so that's really where we want to begin, is just getting in this shared space that no matter where we are all leaders. So I want you to take a moment and just think for yourself, where are all the spaces and places you lead? Some of you introduced yourselves as the owners and founders of organizations, but where else do you lead? Somebody just call out, where's one place that you're a leader? At home. Anywhere else?
Chamber.
The chamber, right? In our city, right? I would suggest that by virtue that you're sitting in this room, you're a leader in Lee Summit, right? Church. With your friend group, yeah. So we all have that responsibility. So it's a journey, not a destination. And one of the things that I love is John Mackey says that leadership is an ongoing journey of service, not a static position of power. And so for me, I shared at the top of the time together, I began my leadership journey almost 30 years ago in a classroom in inner city Indianapolis with 21 students. And they didn't necessarily sign up to be led. They didn't get to pick to be on my team, and I didn't get to pick them. But there we were in August of 1993, placed in a classroom together, and we had to figure it out. And so my journey from that group of 6th graders has taken me to a variety of places. But the things that I learned about myself in that classroom in those moments really are foundational to who I became as a leader. So after teaching for a number of years, I transitioned into school leadership. And that then took me into leadership spaces in the higher education sphere. I had the privilege of being a founding staff member of an innovative teacher residency program in the city of Memphis. And so when I say that I worked someplace where there were three of us, there were three of us. And those of you that have ever done startup, where are all my startup people in the room? Ever started something? You know that starting up anything is like building an airplane while you're flying it. And so there are things that I have learned through my mindfulness practices that I think, gosh, that would have served me really well while I was building that airplane. But I've had that opportunity and then have spent time working as the director of professional development for a large urban school district that had over 3,000 employees. And that's actually where I first began my mindfulness journey. And I was serving as the person who was responsible for all of the training and development for those 3,000 employees, and found that I became a better leader. And I thought I was a pretty good leader when I really got intentional and mindful. So we're going to talk about how mindfulness can weave into our leadership journeys. So how many of you practice mindfulness currently? Any mindfulness practitioners? So I see there's a few of you that Robin has gotten a hold of in the room. Well, I want to make sure we have a shared definition of what mindfulness is. So if you'll humor me for just a moment and take a quick look at this video.
You may have heard this word mindfulness. It's become something of a buzz phrase of late. I'm going to give you one simple, serviceable definition, which is this. Mindfulness is the ability to know what's happening in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. Imagine how useful this could be. Just as an example, driving down the road and somebody cuts you off in traffic. How do you normally react? I think most of us, we normally react by having a thought, which is, I'm pissed. And then what happens next? You immediately, habitually, reflexively inhabit that thought. You actually become pissed. There's no buffer between the stimulus and your reaction. With just a little bit of mindfulness, in that same situation, you might notice my chest is buzzing, my ears are turning red, I'm having a starburst of self-righteous thoughts, I'm getting angry. But you don't necessarily have to act on it and chase that person down the road, screaming at them with your kids in the back of the car thinking you've gone nuts. Now, you might be thinking, don't I need to get angry sometimes? Aren't I justified? I would say yes, but probably not as much as you think. The proposition here is not that you should be rendered by mindfulness into some lifeless, non-judgmental blob. The proposition is that you should learn how to respond wisely to things that happen to you, rather than just reacting blindly. And that, my friends, is a superpower. How do you get it? The way to get it is through meditation. I believe that meditation and mindfulness are the next big public health revolution. In the 1940s, if you told somebody you were going running, they would have said, who's chasing you? But then what happened next? The scientists swooped in, they showed that physical exercise is really good for you, and now all of us do it, and if we don't, we feel guilty about it. And that's where I think we're headed with mindfulness and meditation. It's going to join the pantheon of no-brainers like brushing your teeth, eating well, and taking the meds your doctor prescribed for you. Let me just close by saying, mindfulness is not going to solve all of your problems. It's not going to render your life a nonstop parade of unicorns and rainbows. Nonetheless, this is a superpower, and one that is accessible by you immediately.
So mindfulness is just that. It is about allowing yourself to be fully present in the moment without judgment, right? To have the thoughts that you're going to have, to not beat yourself up because you're having the thoughts, but to be aware of them in the moment and how they're impacting you. And that is crucial for us as leaders. What we know is that our brain likes to replay the past. Some of you, when you entered in here and were waiting, and some of you even now as I'm talking, you are going back and reflecting over that phone call you had that didn't go exactly like you thought, the meeting that you had that you didn't say the thing you meant to say, and you're reflecting. And there's nothing wrong with reflecting, but it's that ruminating, right? I'm replaying it over and over again. Am I the only person that's ever done that? Where you've had the conversation 12 different times with all the things you should have, would have, could have said if you had just been a little more quick-witted. Or if you had just held your tongue, you might not have said the thing, right? And so you replay that. Our brain does that all the time. We want to solve the problems of the past. And if we're not doing that, then we're doing the alternative, which is some of you are already preparing for tomorrow and the meeting you have to have tomorrow, the conversation you have to have when you get home today, the thing that your child did or didn't do that now you're going to have to address as soon as you walk in the door, right? So I see some head nods and some smiles. So I at least know I'm not the only one. I won't call any of you out, but I know it's good to know that I'm not the only one who plays the worst case scenario game. Anybody else play that? The worst thing, like I go through all of the things that could go wrong when I get to, I did it today, coming here, caught myself saying, okay, I never asked if I needed to bring my own laptop. I never asked I'm assuming because of where I'm going, there's going to be technology, but I didn't ask any of these questions, right? So worst case scenario is I'm going to get there and I can't use my PowerPoint. And then what am I going to do? So I probably wasted a good 6 minutes thinking about something that clearly did not happen. I had wonderful tech access and wonderful tech support when I walked in the room, right? But my brain wasted all of that energy and not being fully present. And so mindfulness is about recognizing when you're ruminating over the past or you're playing the worst case scenario game, and what happens is you miss the moment that you're in. Right? Because someone is up talking like right now, and you're missing that really impactful thing I just said that's going to change your life because your brain was elsewhere. Okay, I really didn't say that thing, but just thought I'd put that out there for anybody. It's like, what? What did she say? What did I miss? But it's about learning to notice where you are, like right now, just pausing for a minute and noticing what's even going on with your body. Like, what is your body saying to you in this moment? Are you just now slowing yourself down enough to catch your breath? Because you came high energy from one thing to the next, right? So I got into my mindfulness practice right before COVID hit. And you talk about needing something that you didn't know you were going to need until you got there. And I went from being in a central office of a large school district to, for a short period of time, being back home, to then being back in the office. But even when I was back in the office, everything was on Zoom, right? And everyone remembers how we first did Zoom in the beginning, and some of us still do Zoom this way, right? So maybe no one else's organization did this. That's why I'm leaving the district unnamed. There's a 10 o'clock meeting, right? It ends at 11 o'clock. Guess what happens at 11 o'clock? There's an 11 o'clock meeting. And guess what happens after the 11 o'clock meeting? There's a whole nother meeting at 12 o'clock. And we started thinking we were being super efficient by scheduling all these meetings back to back to back. And what did we do to ourselves? We looked up and we never left we sat in the same seat for 5 hours. And you got to the end of the day and you're like, why does my back hurt? Why is my neck? Well, because you've been sitting in the chair, and we lost I would never schedule a meeting at 10 o'clock and then 11 o'clock because I knew I was going to need to walk to the restroom. I was going to need to go to the next meeting, right? But when we got this wonderful technology that invaded our lives, we could just click, 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 click. And it was when I started integrating those micro practices in between my meetings that I found myself being better in each and every meeting. I also got better about saying, nope, I'm not doing back-to-back. So I finish at 11, I can't meet until 11:15, right? I may be at home, I may be at my desk, but I need a minute to catch my breath. And so because I became more mindful, I noticed how it was impacting me because I was just going from meeting to meeting to meeting, and I was missing stuff. Right? Because I had not yet closed out in my mind the last meeting. I wasn't fully present in the next place. And even now that things have resumed to whatever our current state is, we can still be guilty of that. right? We run into this wonderful thing that we're excited to come to, the recess, right? As an elementary teacher, recess means break. Like, it's the time you take a break. We come here to do this, but we're still ruminating over what happened earlier in the day. We've not yet fully become present in the moment. And so it's thinking about noticing what's happening in my body. Where is my mind? Am I here in the moment? And having those thoughts without passing judgment on ourselves. Like, oh, my mind just wandered. I'm not a bad person because my mind just wandered, but my mind just wandered. Have the thought and then bring myself back. And so that's how, for me, mindfulness really became important to my journey. And out of that was born this idea of an engaged leader. So like I said, I thought I was a pretty good leader. And I've been told I was a pretty good leader. But what I found was mindfulness made me more aware of myself in each and every interaction that I was having, but it also made me more aware of my team. And so it strengthened who I was. And so when Robin and I worked together and really thought about what does it look like for a leader to be engaged, what comes to mind when you hear that phrase? Somebody just popcorn out. What is it? What do you think of when you hear the phrase engaged leader?
Eye contact.
Okay.
Good listener.
Mm-hmm.
In the moment.
In the moment. Interacting. Okay.
Feeling valued.
Valued.
Safe. Good listener.
A good listener. Safe. Okay. So engaged leaders are all of those things. And what I found for me when I integrated mindfulness into my own leadership practices in a really intentional way, that these three areas really surfaced for me. One was about my self-management. Like, how did I show up every day to work? Right? Because life happens outside of your company. I don't care how successful it is. I don't care how great you're doing in the position you hold. Life happens outside of it, right? You get up in the morning. I mean, there are those of you who have parented and grandparented children at home while also trying to run businesses, something you never imagined having to do. And if we're not okay, everything else that we're responsible for won't be okay, right? The people we lead, whether they're in our church, our home, our businesses, our communities, they won't be okay. So the first idea is around this idea of self-management. Then it's how we engage with others. One of the things that I found really helpful when I started being more mindful is I started noticing the team members that I led better, right? So I can remember after having a session, in the certification process and practicing my mindfulness, noticing that one of my team members started eating lunch at her desk every day. And she hadn't done that before. And she'd been with the company long before I ever joined. And I just noticed it. And it made me curious, right? That's part of the process of being mindful, because you allow yourself to be curious. And I found myself one day, just after I'd noticed it a few days, and I asked her, I said, why'd you start eating lunch at your desk? I just noticed that recently. And she said, well, I noticed that you seem to get so much done during the day, and you always eat lunch at your desk. You talk about a reflection, because that's not true. I didn't get so much done every day. That's misconception number one. But I didn't realize, right, that the way I was managing myself impacted my team in a way that was not my intent. And the real reason I ate lunch at my desk every day was because many, many years ago when I was 3 and I became a teacher, people always told me don't eat in the teacher's lounge because sometimes people get too gossipy and it gets toxic. So I just have become accustomed to eating lunch at my desk. That was it. There was no other reason. It wasn't necessarily about work productivity. I was usually eating my lunch and it might have looked like I was working, but I was scrolling through looking at new shoes at DSW. So it had nothing to do with my productivity and efficiency. But because I was more mindful and started noticing things, I was able to course correct something that was not a practice or a habit that I intended the people that I led to pick up on. So that's that. And then this idea of intentional development is around how we lead the teams, the organizations, the work that we're responsible for, and how when we're more mindful, we can both lead in the present and for the future at the same time. So that really is what I think about when I think of this idea of the engaged leader. And so there's an Elizabeth Gilbert quote that talks about, it says, you should select your thoughts the same way you select your clothes every day, right? We can intentionally choose what we focus on, and we can choose our mindfulness. We get to choose our mental state, because here's the thing, if we don't choose it, the world will gladly choose it for us, right? That the guy who got cut off in traffic, right? We get to choose how we respond to those things. And so the engaged leader is that person who is the person who can see what's happening on the dance floor and be at the balcony level at the same time, right? You can be aware of that your colleagues are starting to eat at their desk while also planning for the big events that you have to, because you stay mindful and present. Now, let me give the disclaimer. I am a recovering multitasker, right? We live in a world that promotes multitasking. We were just talking, like, what did we used to do when we couldn't check our email while we were having dinner? Like, there is actually a lifetime ago where you had the email thing was a new thing anyway, but people never expected you to respond to them all day long. Or what happened, remember way, way, way back in the ancient day that when you left your home, you were away from it and no one could reach you by phone? Right? I mean, there are those of us, I mean, I'm 3, so this doesn't apply to me. But I mean, I was 3, but I heard stories that once upon a time when children left home to go to school, they actually couldn't talk to their parents again until they got back home. So they actually had to make plans with their parents before they left home in the morning for school because they weren't going to see them till dinner time. Anybody remember way, way back in that mythical land? And so we live in this world that promotes not being mindful, not being fully present, because we can multitask. And actually, there's quite the opposite of true. We cannot actually focus well on multiple things at one time. It's why there are so many accidents that people have when they're texting while driving, because they think they're multitasking and they think they can pay, and it doesn't happen. I actually was driving the other day and watched someone, like just 2 lanes of traffic, everyone's moving perfectly. And this guy, thankfully, was, a number of cars ahead of me. And he just veered off and went down an embankment into somebody's front yard. Like, there was nothing that happened. There was nothing in the road. He wasn't swerving to miss anything. And, I looked over as I'm driving by, and thankfully he was fine, but his bumper wasn't. It was over in these people's driveway, and the front end was up. And I'm like, he had to have just been texting and driving. Like, just not fully present in the moment. And so we really want to think about how, as a leader, and so I want to just spend some time, the rest of our time together, with this idea of self-management, because this is the most fun one to me. Does anybody recognize that picture? What's that a picture of? Yeah. Anybody in here ever been rock climbing? Okay, yeah. So you talk about a real world illumination of mindfulness. Do you know that you can't rock wall climb and not stay mindful and fully present in the moment? Like, I found the first time I went rock climbing, after I'd been rock climbing before. Maybe that was why I didn't enjoy it as much, because I wasn't mindful. But I found that the time that I spent rock climbing, I wasn't thinking about anything else except what was right in front of me. Where was my foot going next? Like, I was fully present, me and these things on the wall, as I'm trying to get up the wall, thinking about my upper body strength. I guess the moments I faded off, thought, probably need to do a few more push-ups, because you need more upper body strength than I think I have to accomplish this. Anybody in here ever ridden a motorcycle? It's the same people. Y'all are daredevils, that's what I think. You stay pretty in the moment when you're riding a motorcycle, don't you? pretty focused. If you're driving it, for sure, you're not allowing your brain to drift off. You don't usually see people on motorcycles texting and driving. Right? Kind of, right, the thought of it is absurd in and of itself. And so what I found in my own self-management was my ability to be more reflective and aware. My identity, who was I in the moment, and then the importance of my overall well-being, right? That all matters. So mindfulness isn't just about rock climbing and about motorcycle riding. It's about how we eat, right? Because there used to be a time that when we went out to dinner with people, we were with the people we were with. We were fully present in the moment. We had really rich conversations. And now, anyone ever been out and you've seen a table of people and everyone is doing what? I'm like, why are you here? You know, but we've encouraged that as a society, right? And so we as leaders, even in our homes and around the dinner tables, we can lead mindfully and invite people back to being fully present. Exercise. One of the first places, I keep covering up this microphone, he's gonna get me. Like, I realize I keep doing that. I remember doing a wall squat at the gym the day after having done a mindfulness session and being much more in tune with my breathing, being much more in tune with how my body was actually feeling. So thus, I didn't let my brain convince me that I was fatigued when I really wasn't, because I was in the moment. I'm like, your legs can sit here longer. You're fine. You're fine. You're not going to die. Like, no one's ever died from a wall squat, Robin. Just stay in it, stay present. And so mindfulness is woven throughout our self-management as leaders. It's not just about work. All right, so I want you to turn and talk to someone near you about, what does your busy you look like? Who are you when you're busy? Like, your to-do list has 25 things on it. You've got deadlines, you've got orders coming in. I'm just gonna give you 2 minutes, and then I'm gonna do a double clap to bring your attention back. But talk with somebody around you. What does it look like when you're your busy self?
Right there.
There it is. Oh, good, good. Thank you. She's got it right there.
Look at this. Today. So, busy, go from one.
I would take notes. What's busy? I think my busy because I have fires that constantly pop up that I have to put out. So, yeah, I'm getting my stuff done, but it's like boom, email, fire, boom, email, fire, boom, email, fire, phone call, fire, and I'm just locked in trying to get all this done. Then I had this big task that now got a little shadow because I did all these small tasks. They both needed to get done, but busy me didn't put the time in the appropriate spots.
Today, I was just talking about people don't really have control of their own day. And people can't trust what I was I need to call somebody for the phone. Back in the day, I had to go to the phone booth.
Yeah, well, you know, it was okay to not be able to get a hold, to not be able to get a hold of somebody, not call somebody right there.
Right.
You know,
I love it. I love it. All right. So what is some busies? What do busy yous look like?
Less effective.
Less effective? Scattered. Distracted.
Down the rabbit hole.
Down the rabbit hole. I heard another one. Not engaged. Stressed. Overcommitted. Tired. Yeah. Right? And the question is, what do we do about it? Right? I mean, we're always, I heard, let's see if I can see your name. Bruce. I heard Bruce say, there used to be a time, right, when it was okay to not be able to get a hold of someone. Like, I am just, well, I'm 3. I was 3 when I heard this story. But I remember where there weren't even answering machines in your home. Like, remember the time if you called someone and they weren't home, you just didn't get them. And you tried them back later. And it was okay. You know, and then there was that great invention of answering machines. Woohoo! Right? And that changed things. And now I'm sure we all have it, where the moment we finish this session, we look at our phone and there are 1,000 new emails and 2,000 new text messages. And if some of you have multiple streams of that happening, right? There's your work phone and then there's your personal phone. And each of those have 1,000 emails and 1,000 text messages and then 12 phone calls. And my favorite now is when people call you and they don't leave messages and then they're upset that you didn't call them back. And they're like, well, you saw I called. I know you saw I called because you have a smartphone and it tells you you missed my call. And I'm like, well, yes, but I figured if you really wanted something, you'd do the old-fashioned thing of leave a message, right? Okay, so that's your busy self. Let's put yourself in who you really are, though. Who you really want to operate as most of the time. What does best you look like? Let's hear some words that describe best you.
Calm.
Calm, thoughtful.
In the moment.
In the moment.
Positive.
Positive, oh, yeah.
Intentional.
Intentional. Relaxed.
In service.
Oh, in service, that's good. Yeah. Someone want to say what was said over there at that table a little louder? I was going to leave it anonymous. I wasn't going to call it out, but I was fully present in the moment, so I heard that. I told you I was an elementary school teacher, so got really good hearing.
I didn't know he drank till I saw him sober one.
I knew this was going to be a fun group.
He's our basketball coach, but he can be writing, writing on the board. He said, Daryl, be quiet.
Yeah, absolutely,
What are you talking
absolutely.
about back there?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, my students used to get so annoyed with me. They're like, how did you hear me? I was whispering. Not enough, not enough. So, yes, before I developed mom ears, I had teacher ears, which, you know, then when you have a child, it drives them nuts because it's like you can hear everything. But I want to share this statistic. I was looking back at my notes and I didn't want to leave it because this, for those of you who like data and numbers and all of that. So, this was a study done with over 5,000 participants. And in an average 16-hour day of wakefulness, which for many of us, that actually looks more like 20 hours, right? Many of us don't get 8 hours of sleep. We are not present 7.5 of those 16 hours. So that would mean that if for half of the time I'm awake, I'm not fully present, I'm not mindful, that means that there's a chance that I've done mindless driving, mindless eating, mindless conversations, mindless working, and mindless leading. I mean, if half of the time I'm awake. At some point, I've done everything in my day mindlessly. And there are a lot of things like that our brain just naturally goes on autopilot and does. So I want you to just pause for a moment, put yourself in your bathroom first thing in the morning, ready to brush your teeth. Which hand are you using to pick up your toothbrush?
Right.
Okay. And then what do you do next? Put toothpaste. Right? And it's automatic. You don't think about it. And our brain likes that automaticity. But it's that then allows us to sometimes check completely out and not be fully present because we've done it so habitually. And again, things like brushing your teeth, if you've got it down to a science and your dentist gives you the thumbs up, keep doing it that way. But when you think about leading a group of people, leading your family, leading in your community, are those really the things you want to put on autopilot? Are those really the things that you want to do mindlessly? And so these matter, this idea of being self-aware, because it helps us to know what our strengths are, know what our vulnerabilities are, our triggers, right? Because we all have them. So I had to figure those out pretty early as an elementary school teacher so that I could kind of safeguard against getting oversensitive about things with children. And for me, it was eye rolling. I really dislike those 11 and 12-year-old eye rolls. It just, right? It just, and so again, I wish I was a little more mindful then because I might have handled those things a little better because I would have known, oh, she just rolled her eyes at me and I am triggered and I don't like this right now, but I can breathe, right? And I can handle how I respond to this. I don't have to react. I can take a moment and give myself permission to breathe deeply before I respond, right? But I got to know what those are. I've got to be self-aware. It helps us to appreciate our humanness, to know that yes, because I'm a leader doesn't make me superhuman. Instead, it makes me aware of my humanity. And so I have a better chance of controlling and being intentional. Somebody said their best self is intentional. My best self can be intentional about how I interact with people. It also could help me better understand those eye rolls come from a place. And a lot of times that eye roll isn't really even about me. It's about, I said something that sounded like her mom's tone that was in her ear, nagging at her before she came to school, or that person who showed up at work and now they are rolling their eyes. I also don't like adult eye rolls either, just for the record. It didn't go away as a thing for me. It is still bothersome when adults roll their eyes at me as well. But I was able, when I'm mindful and fully present, I can be aware that eye roll might not have a thing to do with me. So I don't have to react to it. Instead, I can choose my response differently. And it helps so that I don't hinder my problems, my leadership. So I want, for my friends that are mindful, this practice will probably be familiar, but we're going to take a mindful moment. I'm going to invite you to put this in your toolbox. It is my hands down favorite one. So if you've been to anything I've done before, you've seen me do this because this is my go-to. What we call at Mindful Momentum and the Engaged Leader, it's my micro practice, right? I appreciate the video where it says meditation and mindfulness are the next revolution in public health, and I agree with that. But sometimes people's response is, I don't have time, right? I don't have time for one more thing. And so I fell in love with this idea of micro practices because it really is just enough. And I can tell, Tina, you're a pro because you're getting ready. Your body is ready to be mindful. She knows what's coming next. So I'm going to invite all of you to just put your feet down on the floor. Sit up in your chairs. If you're comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes. If you're not, just lower your gaze and look down. And I just want to invite you to be here in this moment, to take a deep breath in, and then exhale. Notice your body. Notice the chair underneath your body, how it's supporting you. And just take another deep breath in. And then exhale. And on this next breath in, I want you to picture the word just. J-U-S-T. So as you breathe in, see the word just. And as you exhale, see the word this. T-H-I-S. Inhale, just. Exhale, this. And as you continue to inhale and exhale, continue to visualize the words just, this. One last inhale with just. Exhaling this. And now just start to notice your chair underneath your body. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes, raise your gaze, and come back into the room. I'd love to hear how anyone experienced that. What did you notice? Relaxation. You were excited. You knew. You were like, oh, this is getting ready to be the moment I've been looking for. What else did you notice? Yeah.
I kind of started out focusing on it, and then I started saying, if I shared this with my team, would they like this, or would they be like, this is weird?
The rabbit hole.
Oh, man, should we also be like keeping track of the other things they like and dislike, and where are we going to save that file?
Right? And that's why it's a practice, right? And that happens. And the beauty of it is, right, you have all of the thoughts. You don't cast judgment. You notice them. And then work to bring yourself back to being in the moment. Right? That's part of the mindfulness, is being aware, oh God, my mind just wandered off. Right? But you were present enough to realize the moment when it happened. Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else want to share?
It calmed a lot of the noise in my head down. Mm-hmm. Like I was able to focus on just this.
Just this. Look at it. See?
At first I thought it was easier to visualize, like the words, then it got harder. I don't know if I was thinking too much about, okay, how does just this look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's a practice, like anything else. The more you do it, remember I told you I'm a recovering multitasker. So my brain still wanders off and it goes into 1,000 places. And then I come back to my anchor of, oh yes, just this, right? Without judgment. There's absolutely nothing wrong with me because my mind wandered off. I'm not less mindful of a person because my mind wandered off. The fact that I'm aware of it probably means I'm a little more mindful because I notice when my thoughts are racing and raging and I'm struggling to calm them down. And I can then notice how that's impacting my body, right? Did anyone else feel like the difference physically? Like your shoulders, some of what you walked in carrying, they just slowly made their way down and just relaxed just a little. So that's my go-to strategy. So when I say mindfulness made COVID zoom get better, because what I started doing is before I clicked into the next meeting, I would stop and do that micro practice. I would give myself permission to be 60 seconds late with a click into a meeting and just take a moment. And there have been people that I've worked with that they said, you know when I use that? I'm like, no, tell me. And they're like, before I get out the car in the garage, before I go in the house after my commute home, just so that I can enter my house and be fully present. Leave all the stuff that was ruminating in my head on the drive home, leave it in the car, so I can walk in and be at least attempt to be best me, right? Before I engage with my family or my dog or whatever. So part of being an engaged leader is really about being authentic and being true to ourselves, straightforward with others, no matter the situation we find ourselves in. And so being more mindful about how we are impacted also impacts our ability to be more authentic with the people that we lead and we serve. And we all know this, right? We've all worked with, for, around people who are not authentic, right? They're one way when they're with people who they believe have power and leadership and authority, and then they're completely different with other people, right? So my favorite, again, because I was 3 when I started teaching, my favorite story was I eventually became a principal. Worked as a principal for a while, and I remember going in to do an observation. And children are the best humans to work with because they are so honest. And children can read through BS like nobody else. So if you ever think you've got a good game going and you've got a good facade, put yourself in a room full of children and then you will find out how good it is or isn't. So I go in to observe this teacher, and she's teaching and she's trying really hard, and the kids are trying really hard to sit and pay attention. And so finally, student raises his hand, and she can tell she does not want to call on him. Like, this is the kid that you're not sure what he's going to say, even though he says it under his voice. And he raises his hand and he will not put his hand down. And so finally she calls on him, and she kind of looks back at me as I'm sitting in the back taking notes. And she said, yes. And he said, can I ask you something? I got a question for you. And she's like, okay. She's thinking, okay, I'm hitting this lesson. It's great. And he says, why are you talking to us differently with her in here than you talk to us when she's not in here? And you could just see her, that puddle that was in the cartoon, that was her. And I just packed up my things and I left because I thought, I can't save her from this, and I don't want to watch her try to dig out of it. So I'm just going to excuse myself, and we'll talk about it later. But it was this idea of the whatever situation we may find ourselves in, right? And sometimes when we're not mindful, we show up in inauthentic ways. And our team begins to question who we are and whether they can trust us because they see these different sides of who we are. So it's really important for us to think about that. Last thing, and then we're about done. Wouldn't it be great if life looked like this all the time? Just nice and calm. But it doesn't, right? Waves come, sometimes in the form of people, of projects, of problems, of uncertainty, of unexpected things. And so as leaders, whether that's at home, with our children, our grandchildren, whether it's in our community, our neighborhood associations, whether it's here at the chamber, we have to be aware. And mindfulness can be a great anchor to help us when the waves come, right? To give ourselves that permission as leaders to be self-aware, to care for our own well-being, which may mean blocking off time and saying, yes, these 2 hours, I'm not going to do anything for anyone other than me, right? Taking those moments It can look like giving yourself 60 seconds to breathe deeply before hopping into the next meeting. Because as leaders, we are the culture creators in our homes and our organizations. And how we manage ourselves send messages to those that we lead. And so I shared with you about my lunch eating fiasco. I worked for one of the most amazing leaders I've ever met, one of the most intentional human beings I've ever met. My boss, when we were starting the teacher residency program in Memphis, was a father of 5 daughters. They even had a girl dog at the house. But he was amazing, just in terms of understanding, creating organizational culture, with creating rituals and traditions in families and organizations. So we had all these amazing traditions in our organization. And when we started, it was me, him, and one other person. And by the time I left the organization 8 years later, we had a staff of about 35 people that we had grown, and we had grown to serving hundreds of teachers versus just the 21 folks who took a shot on us. 21 is my magic number. I was 13 when I did that. But we had just hired a bunch of new staff, and they were younger than us. We'll just call it that. And one day he and I were talking, and he said, I've noticed there's all these emails that are starting to fire back and forth at night. Like, people are emailing at 9 and 10 o'clock at night. What? And I've gotten emails from so-and-so at midnight. What's that about? And I said, that's you. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, so here's what you do. We all know this is what you do. You leave work when we leave. We all leave. You go home and you are super dad, right? You are the dad who's having dinner every night. You and Kelly and the kids. You're at the games. You are fully present. You're homeworking. You're having those amazing conversations around the table with your girls. And then once the girls and Kelly all whisk off to bed, you start firing off emails. And you start about 9:30 every night. And he said, well, yeah, but that's because my family's done and I'm just getting a few things done. Spend about an hour and a half before I go to bed doing things. I said, right, but they think you want them to respond. And he was like, well, that's not my intent. I said, it may not be your intent, but it's the impact. And so our lack of mindfulness can send messages that we don't intend to send, right? And I appreciated his own comfort level with engaging in that hard awareness, right? I saw that another way as a leader who I was working with. Her mom was in hospice, and her way of coping was to continue to come to work, right? She was the person that started this organization. She's going to come to work, she's going to come to work, she's going to come to work. And I asked her, I said, didn't you tell me one of your staff members didn't take off for their dad's heart surgery? And she said, well, yeah. And she said, and I tried to convince her to take a day, that it's totally okay. You have to take care of your family. I said, you told her that, but what'd you show her? And she said, what do you mean? I said, you haven't taken time off. I said, yes, we all know you leave to go to your mom when you leave work. But when have you ever not come to work to go care for your mom? And so as leaders and culture creators, when we're more mindful, we can catch how our choices might impact those that we serve. And so that's really what being an engaged leader is all about, is using mindfulness as one of those many tools in your leadership tool belt to help you be more aware of yourself, more aware of those that you serve and lead, and what you might be missing and how you can better lead your team, your organization, your department. Some good resources for those of you that are interested in digging more into this. Conscious Leadership is a wonderful book, easy read if you're a reader. Focus. Time Magazine this summer did a whole special edition on mindfulness. And so it looks at a lot of the science behind it, but also mindfulness in terms of your health practices. And then there's, for those of you that don't, I'm sure you already do, and you know how to get a hold of Robin Todd at Mindful Momentum. And then there's a great set of tools you can find at mindfulleader.org. So I'll step back if anyone wants to take a picture of that. But it has been my absolute joy to share with you all today, and hopefully gave you a tool and some thoughts that you can take and put into practice. My challenge for each of you, when you leave work tomorrow, not leaving here, when you leave work tomorrow, I want you to take a different route home. Because most of us drive home very mindlessly.
You're in Lee Summit, you have to take a different route every time.
This is true. Facts. That you are absolutely right? Because I had to think about the best way to get here. It's like, how is 50 highway involved in this? And that determines where I go. But just to think about, or if you take the same route, pay attention. What might have you missed over the route? Because we've got 1,000 new restaurants popping up around here. And if you blink twice, you didn't realize that new one was like the new coffee shop. I didn't know that. Right over there by Cooper's Hawk. Some of you are like, there's a new coffee shop over there? There is. So, but thank you all so much for having me today. You all have been so much fun.